In this video, I look back at Chadwick's development over the years, from the very first tail chaser that wasn't up to much to a more complex tail chaser that also wasn't very interesting, and using the tools that are now available to us modelers today, how we develop to more interesting layouts. We also look at channel criticisms, and even my lovely little bridge has suffered the wrath of the keyboard warriors. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. Well, what's this video all about? Well, this one's about my track plan, really, how Chadwick has got to where it is, but perhaps more importantly from your point of view, the mistakes I've made along the way. Now, you've got to bear in mind, my imagination is not that good. You know, I can't necessarily see a beautiful layout with how the track plan should work and the best way to lay a track for a circuit or a more realistic sort of prototypical outlook. I just kind of look at it, draw a bit of paper, or I used to, nail track down and crack on with it. And I've made some terrible mistakes. And here is a link to my very first video number 1, called block detection. It's not about block detection, funnily enough, but what you can see is that I built a layout that was 12 foot long by 3 foot wide. It was on 2 6 foot by 3 foot boards. Why? Because they would fit in the back of my Vauxhall Vectra one at a time, and I could go to a local model railway show. And then I realised it was just awful, to be perfectly honest. It was so limiting. I had the space to expand and chose not to do it, thinking I'm going to become the great, model railway exhibitor, let's say. Anyway, got over it. Right. Now, planning model railways I find to be a daunting sort of task, and you make loads of mistakes along the way. Unless, of course, you've got the friends who can help you, and there is something on the market called AnyRail. Now, AnyRail is a PC-based program. It's not usable on fruit-based computer systems, though with your Apples you can sort of segregate your hard drive and bring it in, but that's complicated stuff and I don't understand it. So AnyRail, you can open it up, you can design your own layout, and you can choose your scale, you can choose your track, such as Pico 100 or Code 75 or whatever, and all the bits and bobs, your double slips and all that are there, and you can lay them out and design it. And to be perfectly honest, it's brilliant, because there are so many people around that they've designed their layouts, and you see them on YouTube and you think, hang on a minute, I can't get my last curve in. The board's not long enough or not wide enough, and you nail another piece of board on. But you know, if you use AnyRail and plan from the start, then you get good at it. But of course, AnyRail costs money. How much? It's $59, I believe, which is 45 to 50 quid, and the license lasts, I believe, forever. Lovely. But of course, you can download AnyRail for free, and you can play with it with up to 50 pieces of track before you have to play, so you can kind of suss it out and think, is it really my thing? But there we go. Now, I was fortunate enough that somebody reached out, a guy called Lee, and turned around and said, you don't want to do it like that, Charlie, you want to try doing it like this. And he got involved with Chadwick from the design of the fiddle yard. And it was like a breath of fresh air. And since then, Lee is now available as a freelance model railway designer using AnyRail, but of course he charges for his time. And I'll leave a link to Lee's email address in the Show More tab. Marvellous. But where do we go with all this? Well, I tell you what, here's a quick look on AnyRail at the lower section of this layout and a 3D look at the whole layout, so you can see the powerful nature of this tool. So here we are in AnyRail, and we're just looking at the storage area of Chadwick. So here we've got the lines to and from Helix 1. They came into this area here, which is the eastern storage area. Let's say here's the western side, and you may not have seen this before, but there's a reverse loop around here, and to be honest, I'd wish I'd built one around this side. Now, if I just bring up the helix, and you sort of see how it sort of shapes up, and if I were to bring up the upper level now, the scenic level, it gets a bit more complicated. Let's just turn off the storage area a minute. So you can see where trains come up the helix, they come into the main area, across the viaduct, through the station area, into the TMD, or back down the other helix. Now, another thing you may not have seen is there's a line here that goes straight through the TMD area and there's two hidden sidings underneath the freight yard, and these also serve as another reverse loop. Marvellous. Now it gets a bit complicated, so I'll turn back on the storage area, and now I'll go to 3D view, and as you can see, you can turn on and off layers throughout the program. So if I press 3D view, it has a little think about it, and then up comes this sort of monstrosity, let's say. So here we are in a 3D view of Chadwick. So here you've got helix 1, and there's the lines coming up through the station and then back down helix 2, and you can move this around and get a better feel, sort of get amongst your layout, and you can see the how harsh the turns are on the helix. You can look at it underneath, and there's the view here coming through the TMD, and there's those two hidden lines of the reverse loop, and there's the other reverse loop underneath. I can make it far more complicated, as you can imagine, and if I come back out of this view and click the layer name button, everything comes up. I hit the 3D view, and this time you see the whole layout in 3D, plus sadly all the sort of wordings and labels and dimensions and everything else. But it does show you one thing, and that's the fact that clearly I walk into here, into the layout, because the reason I changed everything was because my knees were killing me when this used to be a duck under. Now the main driving force behind all the mistakes I've made, I suppose, is the viaduct. So let's go and take a look at the viaduct and see where it all went wrong. Have you subscribed yet? Come on, play nicely. Hit the button. I'm sure you know for quite a long time there's a walk in here, and so I can get to the whole layout without sort of stooping and crawling under. Well, what was that all about? Well, what it was the trains would come across this sort of area here where the viaduct is now, turn and move into this area here, and that would be the main fiddle yard, and over that side there would be the station and the scenic side of things. And things didn't go to plan, because what had happened was every time I wanted to do something, I would crawl under on my knees, crawl into the layout. And whatever I was doing, I would need a tool. So I'd have to crawl back under the layout and go and get it and bring it back. And this board here, which hadn't really developed at that stage, just became a giant toolbox. So that every time I forgot a tool, I'd go under, go and get the tool, come back, stack it up on here. And as the track was building to the fiddle yard, it was becoming almost unusable because it was just a complete mess. You know, it was just poor discipline on my part, really. But anyway, and then my knees really started to pay up, and I realised that I wasn't getting any younger. So what was I to do? So the only thing there was to open it up, and what a great idea will be to build a helix, which then takes us back to the viaduct. Now, when I built this board as part of the roundy, the track level to the bottom of this board is 12 inches or round about 30 centimetres. And underneath here I had some reasonable amount of storage, everything would be fine, brilliant. And then of course it happened that my knees got shot, so therefore I needed to open this area. And then I thought, well, if I open up this area I lose the roundy, so therefore I'll need a helix then to complete the loops. Marvellous. Okay, but the level here I decided on was 7 inches or 18 centimetres because I needed to get my hands in here to clean the track and sort out the odd derailment perhaps, or crash for that matter. Which then meant that with the helix, it had to be 5, to get the right sort of angle so the trains could actually get up it. It actually had to be 5.5 turns, which is really inconvenient, because the problem with having a helix or two helix with 5.5 turns is that when your trains come up out of the through the tunnel from the helix, let's say they take, I don't know, a minute to run around the top end of the layout and disappear. Well, it will take about 6 minutes for them to climb the helix, go round and down the other helix. So if you like, you only see the trains for 1/6 of their working life, which clearly isn't such a good idea. And so with the construction of the helix, obviously we needed something to go on top, which has led to the development of the branch line station, now known as St Margaret's. Any mistakes made in this area? Well, not really. There was platform 1 and 2. Platform 3 would be redundant. Platform 4 would form part of the goods area, arrivals and departures line, and a shunting line. But when I said there was going to be a platform 3, I thought, I know, we won't have a platform 3. This track will be redundant. We'll sort of cover it in grasses and everything else and make it look what disused as British Railways sort of, run down in the late 60s and 70s. And we could pop in an old Siphon G as some kind of a crew vehicle. Marvellous. But we'll have a point in anyway. Now, I made the stupid mistake of putting in this point, gluing it closed, not connecting it up, knowing that it would be a permanently dead piece of track and isolated from the main layout with 2 insulated rail joiners. A friend of mine looked at it and said, I wouldn't have done that, Charlie. What did you do that for? And to be perfectly honest, why on earth did I do that? What a stupid idea, because now I can always make it a redundant line and cover it in grass and everything else, but I could just run a shunter in it or an unserviceable loco just to poke it in there to give a bit of variety. So if you're going to plan to have a redundant, unserviceable, neglected line, there's no need for it not to be connected. Still connect the thing up, because you can always change your mind. How on earth I'm going to get in there, having thought about it, and putting in a point motor underneath, it's not going to happen. I might be able to get some kind of surface mounted point motor in here if, of course, I can free up the point where I super glued it closed and then just put a set of contacts on here and bring power back in. But it was a silly mistake. One other thing I did was I had Steve Smith from Railway Laser Lines construct these platform surfaces, and one thing I've got to do now is to cut them up a little bit, because even though I don't have steam locos, the old the water supply for steam locos needs to be not there, but I need to put the scarring on the platform of where the marks would have been, where they've been tarmacked over or paved over. So that's another little thing to think about, a small piece of detail. Right, a closer look now at this other piece of track, and this area here will be another industry. So I've got one more point to put into here, and then there'll be a private yard fenced off from the main railway, and some kind of factory, perhaps a biscuit manufacturer or something like that in this area here to provide purpose. And there's going to be a hillside here, because obviously where the trains come up from the tunnel of the helix, we need this kind of hillside to build up, but it'd be nice to have an industry in this area. Now, I think most of us as railway modellers suffer from problems with compression of scale and distances and signals and all the details we try to put in, but it all looks compressed and crammed. Now, some people say to me, oh, I wouldn't have put a signal there, or you needed a signal there, or I wouldn't have done it that way, or whatever. But realistically, in the real world, almost every point has a signal. Well, it naturally would, wouldn't it? Because otherwise, your railway would end up in a state of confusion. And whilst here there is sort of littered in signals, really, but I have no choice if I want to make it more realistic. But in reality, from the edge of the viaduct to the back end of the branch line station, in this room it's 5 meters long. Now, so if I upscale that at 176, so it's actually 380 meters long. So it's less than half a kilometer in reality. Well, in my mind, it isn't. From the edge of the viaduct to the end of the branch line station, in my mind, it's about 4 miles. And, rule 1 applies, because you cannot have everything crammed in and you want to do this, that and the other. Because in reality, you wouldn't send a train from the branch line station over to platform 3 in the Parkway station, would you? You'd walk. At the end of the day, it's only about a 10-minute walk, because it's only about 500 meters. It's ridiculous. But let's be perfectly honest, you know, we all build things in. So I take the criticism on the nose. To be honest, I really don't care. If people have a constructive criticism, then I read it, well, I read them all. But I don't take it personally when someone says, oh, you should have done it like that. You'd have need to do it like this. You don't need the signal, it's too close. You can't quite see that signal from there. You need a banner repeater, you need to move it. And some people, you know, they get quite upset with the keyboard responses that we get. But hey, don't take it to heart. Just let it wash over you. I do. And, you know, I know in my heart of hearts that from the viaduct to the Brightside station, 4 or 5 miles. Now moving on to the main Parkway station area. What's gone wrong here in the past? Well, all 4 tracks originally came straight through as straight as a die. And I must confess, I looked at it and I almost wept, and I thought, you couldn't have made something more boring if you tried. So in the end, I just came back and I tore them all out. And of course, they've all been wired with droppers and all this sort of stuff. I don't believe they were ballasted at that stage. Took them all out and then put this gentle curve in. Now, as soon as you put curved track running through a station, of course, you're going to get curved platforms. And I not necessarily struggled, but I did find it quite a little bit of difficulty getting the curve right on the platform to match the track. But when I did that, I learned a valuable lesson. And this is the lesson here, because for this track here on platform 1, I built the platform and then I fixed the track in place to suit the platform, which in reality is probably the way it's done in the real world. At the end of the day, it was, you know, it was a matter of moving it, you know, 2 or 3 millimeters either way, just to give it this gentle curve straight through the platform. Marvelous. It wasn't a massive job, but the station looks so much better for it. Now, I have had some criticisms in this area, and the first one is on the gradient of this line here that goes up to the to Revell's yard, the freight yard. And some kind gentleman said to me that that's no good, that wouldn't happen in reality, would it? You know, it's too steep. I don't know, I have to change my voice then. Another gentleman said, you would never have a track there. You would never have a track beside there. It wouldn't come down. It would come down somewhere else in, you know, approaching the station or whatever. I said, you know, thanks very much for your detail, but we are where we are. Someone else came back and said, oh yes, you can. There's a such and such near, I don't know, Doncaster or whatever. There is a track almost identical to this that comes down from a distant freight line, comes down behind the station and trundles off. And it's brilliant, isn't it, when someone can come back and say, well, actually, you know, there is an example of what you've done in such and such a place. And I find it so reassuring that this is in this hobby, the breadth of knowledge of all the railway modelers is so vast. You know, people will always find an exception to the rule. Okay. The bridge has got a bit of a pasting as well, because people have said that the structure is too wide without a central support. And I'm listening to them, I must confess. Other people have said, when I mentioned about the cable troughing, that I'd got it wrong, and that these 2 tracks here should be 6 foot apart, not 10 foot apart. And the 10 foot would normally be the outside 2. I kind of get that. And someone else turned around and said, I do like this answer, is that if they're 6 foot apart, it makes it very, very suspect for a central support in the middle, because obviously it's close to both, and you won't get a central support if they're only 6 foot apart. And the other problem with having central support is if you get a derailment, it will pull the bridge down onto the train. God, I love these details. So what am I going to do? Well, I believe that I am going to fit a central support, because we have the clearances by luck that this distance here is considerable. In fact, using a scale ruler, the distance between those tracks is actually 15 feet in there, so we can safely put a concrete plinth in, and with a a steel support mechanism to go underneath the bridge. I mean, it was a fair point that someone made. This is not a strong, it's not a box section like a bridge, a modern day bridge where you would have a roof on it and therefore have more rigidity. Anyway, there is one other comment to go with this, and that is you need a 2 meter clearance from the edge of your upright to the edge of the platform. There is a minimum requirement. It used to be 6 feet, but obviously they've gone metric and made it 2 meters. Now, a fine gentleman made a comment saying your bridge is no good because it's too short. You know, you need 2 meters. Well, I don't need 2 meters. What you need is a stainless steel model maker's scale ruler from Expo, because in accordance with this, if I sort of just plonk it into place there, then on the other side there we have we'll call that 9 foot clearance on that side and 12 foot clearance on this side. So we are well within the regulations of bridge clearance to the edge of the platform, which is quite understandable because at the end of the day you don't want to force passengers out closer to the line should there be, I don't know, a fast freight coming through or whatever. Safety first indeed. Right, let's have a look at the new signal. Now here is my new signal from Absolute Aspects, and it's Chadwick 41 and Chadwick 43. Now if I throw 0.403, the green gets transferred to the line leaving platform 1. And if I throw another point, we see the feather coming on to take us through the line that goes straight through the TMD. If I switch the exit point coming off of both of these lines, obviously the same signal is transferred to the other side. Now, going in a little bit deeper now, we deal with the TMD, and if we change a point within the TMD, then we end up with a red light and a position light and a D. D being depot. And if I change the point that comes out of the station, obviously those signals are replicated on the other line. It's all finished except I've yet to sort out the logic for the S, which refers to the sidings on the opposite side of the tracks to the TMD. But I must confess, Absolute Aspects, Tom, you've made a brilliant job of this. Now, of course, I need to thank the drivers and the like who've helped me with this particular, well, not only this particular signal, but signals in the past. Because with this one, because I needed a 3-aspect signal with a feather and the position light and the theatre box and the S and the D, I found the whole, it was just beyond my sort of knowledge. And a few people interject and say, no, Charlie, you can't go from a 3-aspect signal to a ground signal. You have to go via a position light. And then to go into your TMD, you would need a D. To go into your sidings, you would normally have an S. And all this sort of stuff. And and then for Tom down in Absolute Aspects to put it all together for me, it's just mesmerising, to be honest. And I'm developing an unhealthy appetite for signals. I need to get out more. I've actually got a 4-aspect signal outside of, and you'll see it as part of my Christmas decorations. I need to get out more. But drivers, there's one other thing I'd like you to help me with, and that's over by the TMD. So let's take a look at that next. With the single slip here set, our train is cleared to enter the TMD board on a green with a feather. And it would come down this line here, which is the one that takes it through to the 2 reverse loops underneath the hillside. Marvellous. However, it has 2 other options. So one is to go into the TMD. So if I change 0.407 and throw it, the signal back in the station now indicates the position light with the D for depot. and in comes our train into the TMD area. From here on, all the points then in reality would be sort of mandrolic. There would be at no point motors in this area. The reality of it would all be conducted by the staff in the depot. However, there is a catch point here, so that catch point and point 407 would always be operated by a signal box. So you come into here, no problem. Now the next question is this point here, which is point 39. Now if I just close 407 and then point 39, if I throw it, now would be indicating to come into the this S for sidings. I know that isn't enabled just yet. So we come into the sidings here, and this then takes us through into the fuel yard area and allow goods trains to pick up and deposit tankers. Marvellous. So what's the problem then? Well, my problem is I don't really know how to signal the exit from this area. So we've got a catch point here to stop stuff coming out onto the main line. And obviously we've just got an ordinary point here. But I'm thinking here, I imagine we'd need a 3-aspect signal to allow traffic to come from here onto the main line, and also a 3-aspect signal here to come out, because this passenger line is actually rigged for bi-directional running. So we could just as easily, bear with me, 309 close, we could just as easily run our train down into the Revel's yard in the hidden loops, and it could, a TMD could come straight back out again and then go back up onto the up line. So we'd need some signalling. So I think it's a 3-aspect signal here and a 3-aspect signal here, but also we would need a ground signal here clearing into the depot, and perhaps a ground signal here clearing into the fuel depot. So drivers and the like, what do you think? Well, hopefully going through some of the pitfalls that Chadwick has experienced in its development has sort of, given you some sort of comfort with the issues that you might have with yours, going from a small tail chaser to a larger tail chaser to the monster that it's become today. It clearly hasn't been plain sailing. I've come down here often at sort of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning thinking, what is that problem? Why doesn't that work? Why am I getting that short circuit? And all that, sort of things like that. But it's problem solving, I believe, that's good for our mental health, and it keeps us young. It keeps us switched on, and we must strive to do these kind of things. Otherwise, the autumn years will come and claim us, let's say. Now, I've got some bad news, and that is the next video will not come out on Friday the 26th of December. It's Boxing Day. I'm going to take a week off. What a shocking attitude, I know. So it will come out on Friday the 2nd of January. Marvellous. In between there is the West Camel Model Railway Show Christmas exhibition, which takes place on Tuesday the 30th of December, and I will put out a quick sort of flyer video nearer the date so people have the postcode and directions and all that kind of stuff. Anything else? Only to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I thoroughly enjoyed producing videos for you in 2025. It's been a blast. So there's a video here. I thank my patrons and I thank the subscribers, and I'll see you in 3 weeks' time. Thanks a lot, take care. Bye-bye.